Hi, this is Ken Jarecke, and today we're talking pictures with really a legend, Tom Stoddart. He's a British photographer. I'm a huge fan of his work. We don't actually know each other, but we've probably been in the same places, and I consider him a friend. So, hi, Tom.
Hi, Ken. It's nice to connect with you. I think you're right. We probably, have crisscrossed on the stories, but it's great to catch up with you at last.
Where are you at right now?
I live in the north of England, just by a city called Newcastle,
Okay.
and I left. I spent obviously 30, 35 years in London, based in London, and traveling out of London, but the home is where the heart is. I know that same applies to you. And I came back to the northeast of England about 10 years ago, and I left the kind of London madness, and yeah, really happy living back near my roots.
Absolutely. So, just to set the scene, you're a you're a true product of Fleet Street, and you learned from your peers, you learned from longtime editors, you learned on the street your craft, right? And that's kind of what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to capture that knowledge that people like you have with these vlogs.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm kind of really the University of Life type character. I started as a baby, 17-year-old, on my local weekly paper, and uh, got the bug for the covering hatches, matches, and dispatches, as we call them then. And then I moved to a small agency and worked with a very good newspaper man who really taught me uh, what it was all about. And then I moved to Fleet Street, which was my goal. I wanted to be one of these kind of guys who they look very glamorous, charging around the world, and the smell of ink on paper at night in lorries trundling out with millions of newspapers. So um, I finally made it to Fleet Street, and spent my time, learnt my trade really from very good newspaper photographers. And then I mean, this is all in a nutshell. Eventually, I decided that I'd had enough of filling holes, going with reporters and illustrating their stories, and I wanted to have a voice of my own. And that's when I moved kind of away from the newspaper scene and more towards magazines. And it was that time I began to get an appreciation of great photographers, especially great American and French photographers who were storytellers. And I ended up, uh, first of all, I was on the Sunday Times newspaper, and then working for the magazines with a small agency. So kind of very shortened version of a career that's it's 50 years now this year.
So go ahead, just dive into that a little bit. You mentioned storytellers. You mentioned the difference between, uh, I always say photographers are the best reporters because they actually have to be there and they have to witness what's happening out in the field. They can't work from the hotel room. So just tell me about the difference between working for newspapers and then trying to. I don't want to. I don't want to sound prejudiced, but getting to that other level of the difference between a newspaper photographer and a magazine photographer.
Well, as you very well know, they are different animals, really. I mean, photography is such a broad church. That's why I kind of I miss. It hurts me when I see the demise of high street portrait photographers, wedding photographers, all the kind of professional guys that we've lost over the years through the the various kind of financial pressures. But newspaper photographers are really, I mean, a great newspaper photographer is something beautiful to behold. Someone who can be given a brief, a minimal brief, and just told to get yourself there. Um, can walk into any situation and produce a picture, no matter what the light is and what the kind of pressures are and the difficulties. Doesn't get a second chance to go back the next day, etc. So I really respect what they do, and I learned so much from the very best guys in Fleet Street. But at the same time, you always, or the majority of the jobs you do feel that you're filling holes. And a good example is that you will never get a writer's byline missed off a story, but it happens lots of times when the photographers, the sub-editors missed your name off, etc. And I just, after years of working in newspapers, I wanted to have my own voice. As you say, I'm a journalist as well as a photographer, and I wanted to tell stories my way, how I saw them, and to be able to do them over a period of time when, I could look at it and go, well, that's the best I can do. So it was a different way of working, but at the same time, I loved working in Fleet Street. It was such a blast at that time when there were no constraints on budgets and you're going around the world and doing crazy things. But there comes a time when I think, it's better to put down the zooms and pick up a couple of Leicas and 50 rolls of film and just go off and do your own thing. So that's what I did.
So I always like to make this distinct. When you're working for a newspaper, you got to have that picture, like you said. You got to have it for today. And if you're lucky, you make a good picture and people remember it for a few days. With magazines, you might have a week, so you got to make that picture for the week. But eventually, what you're doing, with whether you're shooting for newspaper or magazine, and once you mature as a photographer, you're trying to make that image that might last a year. And if it lasts a year, then it has the possibility of lasting forever. I mean, that's what I've seen by looking at your work. You make an image that has a chance to be almost timeless.
Well, I tried. It's what I try and say to young photographers, that we're not working for tomorrow or the day after or next week. You're working, you're working for a lifetime, and trying to make photographs that mean something in 50 years time. And I know it's something that you're very keen on, trying to impress on photographers to hang on to their copyright whenever possible. Because when you're 25 and you're running around, you're not thinking about suddenly you're going to be 65 and you've had a good time, but you don't own any of your work. And it's something that I was lucky that I kind of recognized early on, that I wanted to own, good or bad. I wanted to own the material that I shot. 95% of it is really bad, but it's in this day and age, especially when times are hard for young photographers and they're getting laid off from staff positions and freelance positions. If you have your work in the right place, you can still pay the rent with your archive. So yeah, I mean, I'm lucky in that regard that I kind of wanted to make this change from newspapers to magazines, and as soon as I did that, I held on to my copyright.
So that's a good time to transition into this book of yours, iWITNESS, that I want to look at. I've had the book. I don't know when it came out, but I've had it for about 15 years, and I've never gone through it because it's a very serious book. But it's filled with images that the reason it's so serious is you can't dismiss these images that you've made in this book. I know your work without seeing the book, and I know what it's going to be like. So I'm going to switch cameras, and if you don't mind, we'll just kind of page through the book and we'll talk about it.
Sure.
So there we have the book. And what year was this published?
This came out in 2004. It was published by Trolley Books here in the UK. It's printed in Italy. And, I'm a kind of great believer that a lot of photographers, bring out a book every time they shoot a story, it seems to me, or every, they bring out many books. And I hadn't done a book, and I wanted it to be something that I was proud of. So this was the first opportunity that I had to put some work together with a publisher who really wanted to do it. And it's for me, I'm still something I'm very proud of. When I give it to someone, I give it to people when. I'm proud of it because I can say, look, this is me. This is how I saw these stories, and this is how I documented them at that time.
Just production wise, it's a piece of art. This paper is beautiful to the touch. So you have a brief introduction by Sir Bob Geldof, and then Jean-Francois Leroy. And who did you mention the editor who edited this?
Well, it was done, as all these things, it's done with throwing prints up in the air and people arguing, and a lot of it's me. A lot of it was my editor at the time. At the time, I was with an agency called the Independent Photographers Group, a very small outfit, and the editor was a guy called John Easterby, and the publisher Gigi. He was very flamboyant, Italian, and so it's a mixture of all of us, really. It's hard. I'm in the middle of putting a book together right now, a second one that I've done after, one that again, and I'm trying to make it as good as I can. And it's very hard when you're doing these things, I think, because, all photographers want everything in double-page spreads, and they want every picture in, and it takes a strong editor to pull you back and say, look, less is more. Let's make it more powerful, but up the quality. And what you referred to before, I've always tried to shoot pictures that are that mean something way down the line. So some of these pictures still, I think, stand the test of time, and so I think it works. I was very, when it came out, it actually, I think it was, I think I'm right in saying, and that it was equal with Jean Richards' Fat Baby that year, with the book of the year in America. So, to be even mentioned in the same on the same page as Eugene Richards is fantastic for me. So it's still something that I'm proud of.
Well, you should be proud of this, and you should be proud of your work. And Eugene Richards is a great photographer, but I got to say, you hold your own with him all the time. I just, I know you're a humble man, but these images, this is an image. There's two images. The one of the child that just got their bag of corn stolen. I mean, that's a frightening story. And
these pictures, I mean, this particular picture, what it's like. You've done it so many times. You're walking, you're hunting for situations, looking for things to document. And I walked into this hut. It's a place called Ajib in southern Sudan. It was in 1998, and there was a terrible famine going on there. And I couldn't believe the scene as my eyes became accustomed to the dark, and these ladies were helping their sister to deliver a baby, and in the other side, in the other corner, was a man who'd been brought in by. I was working for Médecins Sans Frontières, or working alongside them in America. It's obviously Doctors Without Borders, and to see this scene of life and death in one frame, in one room, was just incredible. And in fact, I think I only shot 3 frames on this. It was the light was pouring into the hut, which was very dark, and I didn't actually think that the lens would handle it, and also the scene was extraordinary. And I shot very few frames on this, and I think it was a situation that was part of the story that I shot. Was awarded something in the World Press, and I know that the World Press exhibition was on in South Africa, and a teacher had her school kids there visiting the exhibition, and a little boy was looking at this, and he was looking at it very intensely, this image, and the teacher said to him, what are you looking at? What's grabbing your attention? And he said, something's wrong in this picture. And she said, well, what's that? And he pointed to the boot prints in the sand, and all my highly paid picture editors and all my friends, no one had picked up on my boot prints in the foreground there, going back and forward, trying to find the right angle. And it just emphasized it. Something like that just emphasized it, that you should show your work to as many people as possible and listen to what they see when they look at photographs.
I've thought about this a lot with this image, and as photojournalists working in that tradition, we try not to call attention to ourselves, not make it about ourselves, and all that kind of stuff. But of course, we're always there. We're always there. Our influences in the situation in the room. It's hard to observe something without changing it, and so I thought about this image in that regard, and the boot prints, and I think it makes it, you can think of it as a flaw, but I think it kind of makes it stronger. And I like those imperfections and images, I would have walked into this hut and I've been like, how can I make a picture in here? It's so backlit. And you said the same thing, but that turned out to be a strength. And the boot marks, it is kind of a literal, a representation of the Western eye witnessing this scene. And I just think in the long run, 50 years from now, it might be one of the most important aspects about the frame. And that's, maybe I'm getting too deep into it. I don't know.
Well, I mean, you look at things, I think we all look back at well, we should, as photographers, we should examine everything we do, and we should look at how we conduct ourselves and how we shoot and all of it. So anything that can remind you of images. I mean, our job is the way I see photography. It's very simple. It's a privilege to go to places and to meet people and to be in situations where other people can't go to, and your job is as a messenger. I get into trouble with when I tease my art photographer friends, and I just say that art photography is about look at me, and photojournalism is about look at this.
Right.
We shouldn't be in the in the situation any more than we can be. Yeah, I mean, you're just flicking through those pictures now, and like every photographer, that every one of those images is imprinted on my mind forever, and I can tell you a story about pretty much every image, because they're all important, and the people in the photographs. I mean, Sarajevo, the longest siege in history since the Second World War, 47 months of a city under siege, and to be there and to be kind of part of something like that is it's part of your life. I mean, this was, for a lot of photographers who covered Bosnia, this was our Vietnam. This was our time, you know, to test ourselves as photojournalists. And you know, many of us did it in working for Time and Newsweek and the news magazines. Many did it for newspapers, and you know, I preferred to work on my own and shoot without the pressure of assignments, and just trying to document what I saw.
So, yeah, this was, for as much as it was reported, there were almost, there were a lack of images like we're just looking at here. A lot of the images were kind of the picture of the day, you know, so you'd get, you know, the highlights, the farmer's market that was shelled or something like that. And you didn't get these images that, like you say, I mean, as the photographer, they live with you forever. You never get to forget them.
Well, yeah, that, you know, that picture there you have in front of you is, it's a good example. You know, the guys who were there covering it for Time and Newsweek, and they were quite rightly well protected. They had the armored cars and the huge day rates, and they were shooting the story of the week. My thing would be, well, you can't just move from doing. It's not what I wanted to do. You know, they were doing great work, but it wasn't. I didn't want to do like a weekly story and send my film and then move on to another story. You know, so I wanted to do a bit more in depth. I mean, this picture, for instance, probably in my career, I've shot maybe 5, 6 images that I think, well, I that's it. I couldn't do any better. But this image is one of them because it kind of sums up how I like to work. At this time, I dumped the you know, the equipment that I worked on. I'd worked with newspapers for so long. I dumped the zoom lenses and the flashes and all of that, and I'd moved to Leicas and fixed lenses. And you know, I wanted to be closer. I wanted to be. I wanted to keep it simple. I wanted to see things like this, move in, capture the moment, and then get out. And this is a situation where I saw lots of people were lined up because they'd been given permission to send their children out of Sarajevo, just like our parents had and grandparents had in World War II. They were moved out of London for safety, and the same thing was happening here. And you know, I don't have kids, but if I did, I'd put my son in his best outfit, and I would try and get him out of there. And you know, the lady's holding back her tears, and it's a very simple picture. I feel that the best photographs are simple, and this picture ran for many years with the caption that, you know, I've just described. A woman waits to evacuate her child out of besieged city of Sarajevo. Many years later, I got an email from someone in Australia who said, "This lady is my neighbor." The email was from someone in Perth in Australia. So I went to Perth and I met this lady, and she, you know, what I didn't know was that she'd smuggled herself onto the bus as well. And she hadn't just put her child on the bus, she got herself on the bus, and she'd smuggled herself out. You know, so I spent 3 days with her, and her name is Gordana. Andre is now 6'4". He's a kind of all Australian karate guy, and he doesn't remember anything about being in that siege situation. She told me straight away, I don't like this photograph, I hate it. And, you know, I said, well, but she understands why it's been used a lot. And she doesn't like it because she thinks I kind of, it shows her as being weak, and she didn't want to be. She doesn't like the tear. But I spent 3 days with her, and in the end, we parted as friends. But it's not often, as you know, that you get the chance to square the circle with the work we do, and that was important to go and see her and find out what actually happened to her.
Well, that's the something else you bring up with this image as when you make an image like this, not only does it live with you forever, but you carry that responsibility to the subjects in the photograph, that you have to, you might not want to talk about this image, you might not want to tell that story, but you owe it to the subject in the photographs to share that story. And you have to, regardless of how many interviews you do or how many times you get asked the question, you have to, you owe it to the subject to tell that story. You can never not do that.
Well, exactly. And my caption was wrong for years, because I truly thought that she had just put her child on the bus.
Right.
And so, I was glad to go and see her. The other picture that obviously is, for me, has been used a lot is the lady who looks like Sophia Loren.
Oh, I love that image. It's so beautiful.
And
which is a weird thing to say. I know how weird it is to say, but it is.
It's the photograph. I was actually shooting a story about women in the siege, and I saw this lady walking along towards me. It was in a part of the city called Dobrynia, which was a very difficult area to work in. And I saw this kind of vision coming towards me, and I backed away from her. And again, I shot maybe, I don't know, 6, 7 frames, 8 frames maybe, and then she was gone. And when my agency distributed the set of photographs, Life magazine wanted to run this as a double-page spread, but of course I had no details. I didn't know who she was or her name or anything about her. So I literally went back to Sarajevo with a photograph and asked around and found her. Her name is Meliha, and so I was able to do an interview with her and life around the photograph. And since then, she's become it's become a very kind of iconic image of especially from Bosnia, of courage and dignity and all the things that the photograph says. It's in fact, it's the basis of I mentioned I'm going to do a book, and I mean, we don't know what's going to happen with the virus, but hopefully it will come out in September. The book it's going to be called Extraordinary Women, and it's a collection of images of women that I've photographed like this in extreme situations in areas around the world that we visit as photographers, and we find people who, through no fault of their own, are drawn into these epic events. And women, they're the ones who, whenever there's problems, they're the ones who feed themselves last. They feed their children and their menfolk first. They're the strength in the family, and hopefully the book that I'm doing will reflect that.
No, it's so true, and they're the ones that force the men into civilized behavior at the end of the day. Without them, we'd be more bloody than we're already living in world.
Yeah, and in this situation, obviously, many women were killed because they were the ones queuing for water and bread. They were the ones on the streets trying to find food. So, and it's the same in any desperate situation. Women and always kind of show amazing courage and amazing fortitude.
So it's it's interesting to me. I mean, I hate to talk about technical aspects, but we kind of hit on it. You're a 28 millimeter guy, I'm pretty sure, and that's a hard lens. It's a deceptively hard lens to use.
Yeah, I don't want to steal photographs. You know, I want to be able to stand there in front of someone, even if I don't speak their language, and you know, they can indicate whether they want to be part of this collaboration or not. So, you know, 28, 35 are my go-to lenses. I look at, again, young photographers, and they're using 20 mils and much wider than that. And I'm trying to remember, you know, when I'm trying to remember a collection of great photographs that have been made on ultra wide lenses, and it's hard to come up with them. And I'm much more about keeping it very simple and trying to hunt the moment, and strike when there's something happening.
Yeah, like this image here.
And I want to, you know,
it is a collaboration, is what I mean. I'm glad you used that word.
Yeah, I want to look in. You know, if you can look into someone's face like that, you don't need many words to know exactly what's going on. You know, you can look into their soul. And I think the thing about, you know, color or black and white, I love that Ted Grant quote about, if you shoot in color, you see the color of their clothes, and if you shoot in black and white, you see the color of their soul. Which is, for me, this is how I found my best way of communicating. I'm not a good color photographer, and my way of communicating powerfully was through black and white.
Another thing, you know, it's I've heard you say this before, and I've parroted your words as well to this. I hate it when journalists, you know, talk about themselves and how, you know, hard it was for them and all that kind of stuff. And what you've said and what I've said is that, you know, we always get the choice. We can always leave. And it's kind of funny now in the world we're living in with coronavirus that we can't leave.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. It's yeah, I always thought that, and I love photographers, all kinds of photographers, you know, but, you know, I think it's you have to look now at what's happening in the world, and I think sometimes photography is elevated to, its importance is elevated to something that it isn't. You know, it isn't brain surgery. It's not. You know,
I always use rocket science. It's not rocket science.
You know, it's a privilege to.
It is a privilege.
Be able to go through and to be able to pay your mortgage and feed your family. Essentially, poking your nose and your lens into other people's business, and that's not to say it isn't important. Of course it is, but especially now these days, when you look at what the world is facing, it kind of pales into insignificance.
Yeah, I mean, these are all, you know, life-changing, serious images we're looking at here, but I don't care if it's a football match. You're privileged to be there as a photographer. You get, you know, and you might complain about it to other photographers, but at the end of the day, you should be just so happy to be there, able to witness and have an excuse to be there.
Yeah, and by and large, you know, I think photographers, of course, we're champion whingers. We really know how to moan and complain. But by and large, you know, I think you know, we understand how lucky we are. And you know, when we were both lucky enough to be working at these times, and sometimes you'd be on a story and you'd be sitting in a room somewhere, and it would be invariably bad news, or maybe not. Maybe it was, Mandela just about to be elected or something. But you look around the room, and you'd look across the room, and Nachtwey would be there, Chris Morris, the Turnleys, some of the great French photographers, and great television guys and radio, and you think, this is the place to be, on the best story in the world, surrounded by the best photographers and people that you're competing with, but still, total respect for what they do. And I think that's why I think for me, coming to the end of a career, I look back and I look at the memories and the the kind of respect that photographers had, and the photo editors back at base who would support you and try your best, and then would break the bad news that you didn't quite make it that week or whatever. It was a real privilege to be able to go through that.
So that feeling, being at the top story in the world, surrounded by your competitors and your friends alike, some of the closest people in your life, were your competitors. And I wonder how a photographer, you can have all the talent and you can have all the desire in the world, but how do you become the best photographer you can be without that world-class talent that you're both competing with, but also learning from? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, you look back on a career and you think, I wish I'd been better. I wish I'd had a mentor. I wish I'd been taught which buttons to push earlier. I think you should analyze it, and especially these young guys. So it's a totally different time, and how do they? You can't be ordinary if you're going to work at the top. You just can't be. You can work as hard as you like, and you can do whatever, but somewhere along the line, you have to find a bit of magic to go with your pictures, because you need to get them. Of course, you need luck, and you need the hard work, and you need to understand that it isn't a 9-to-5 job, but you do need someone who recognizes it. You show them your work and they go, you know what, this guy's he's got something that the others don't have that I've seen this week. And I think by looking at, anyone who sort of works alongside James Nachtwey and doesn't learn from him and learn about how exceptional he is, or someone who doesn't see how Salgado works and the commitment, or it doesn't look at Larry Burroughs' work and read everything you can about the man. I think you're missing a trick. You can't do this. You can't do this on your own. You need something. You need someone to teach you, and if you're lucky, you find someone. You find a Howard Chapnick, or you find a Bobby Baker Burroughs, or whoever it is. But I think you do need a little bit of help.
Well,
and you need a lot of luck.
Right. You need help. You need luck. You need somebody that believes in you. You worked a lot with Michael Rand or not?
I mean, I did when my stories were. It was just the end of Michael's career, but he was always a major presence at the Sunday Times magazine, even after he'd left. And of course, he and Harry Evans. I did work. I was privileged to work at the Sunday Times newspaper. Again, I just missed.
That's a dream. That's the perfect example. Harold Evans and Michael Rand together, giving you guidance. Does that even exist today?
No, it doesn't. And I wasn't there when they were there. I was there the next kind of generation, if you like. But when I went to the Sunday Times newspaper, Harry Evans' footprint and mark was all over it. You know, I mean, and the photographers who'd worked for him were still there, and it was just an amazing team. And you know, I was lucky to get in and just sit quietly in the corner and know your place, and kind of suck up all of that skill and commitment, and just see how they conducted themselves, and how clever they were. It was a real eye opener. I remember in 1982, I was in Beirut. I was still working for a tabloid in Fleet Street, and I was there I was covering obviously Yasser Arafat's PLO were being bombed in West Beirut, and I went to the Commodore Hotel, and I standing there looking at all these amazing names, and Don McCullen was there, and he, you know, we got talking, and he said, would you like to come out with me tomorrow and go for a walk around the streets?
That's crazy. And,
you know, I mean, that's
like getting to having Mozart asking you if you want to like play the piano with him.
Well, you know, I mean, and what I didn't know was he'd shot his story, and he'd shipped his film, so he was pretty relaxed and chilled out at the time. It was this story, the very powerful pictures he'd sent of children in disabled mental children who were tied up in a bombed out hospital. But you know, Don is a friend now, and I amazing respect for everything he's done. And we just went for a walk, and it was like a masterclass in seeing, if you like. And I think that's what I mean. But you need a little bit of luck, and you need to understand. I hate it when photographers talk about, you know, you're standing next to them and you say, "Wow, that was great. That was great." You know, and you look at it and you think, no, the word "great" should be reserved for something that's very special. And it was just those kinds of things. People can teach you that, and I think it's important to have that.
I mean, this is a great image. I'll go ahead and say it. And I was just in Madrid a couple weeks ago, and you know, Goya wishes he could have done something like this.
Well, you know, as you know better than anyone, you can't photograph speeding bullets or the sounds of explosions. So, you know, the guys had been fighting all night, and they just heard that one of their comrades had been killed. And these are British Royal Marines, and I was with them. And so,
this is the marshes outside of.
This is southern marshes outside of Basra.
Yeah,
they were tasked for taking Basra, and so I was lucky to be with them. And you know, again, you see what these guys do and the way that was just amazing. And it's I keep using the word privilege, but it is to be allowed to document something like this, because these are important times for those guys as well, you know.
Right.
And
they know it, and they're kind of they like having you there. That's what people don't realize. I mean,
they make you you know, you have to earn their respect.
Right.
You can't go into something like that and not carry your own kit or expect to. And you have to be, once you have their respect, and you have to be honest with them, and you have to have, look, if something happens, I'm going to photograph it because it's my job to do that. But if something happens to me, you know, please, you know, photograph me or do whatever.
Pick up my cameras, grab my film.
Yeah, you're not there as a voyeur or whatever. And once you have their respect and they see that your ego is under control and whatever, they understand that you're there doing a job just as they are, and so it becomes much easier.
Let me just go back to that, because we haven't really talked technically. I wanted it's hard. Like I said, it's hard to talk about technical aspects of things, but we do, we have young photographers watching this, and this idea that, so you're shooting, I'm guessing this is still a 28 here, and this moment is coming together. And as a photographer, you see the light, you see the moment. There's
Yeah.
also another aspect there where you have to make this, um, this has to be readable to the viewer. And so you're
Yeah.
doing this inside of your head, but you're creating this composition that is so pleasing to the eye that the human brain can read the image without having to look too hard. You know what I'm saying? And you've done that
Yeah.
here. You did it in India with the earthquake. I mean, there's a couple. I mean, you're always doing that, but the woman leaving Sarajevo with their child, it's you create, and you create an
Well,
image that is so pleasing to the eye that you attract the viewer, and then they get to see what you're actually trying to tell them.
well, I think what it is it's about leaving out. It's about that, as you say, that computer. And I think photographers who their minds are working very, very fast, and it's about knowing your equipment and kind of having the strap length, the right length. And you see these young guys again, and try and tell them, look, you know, why have you got a lens cap on? All this kind of stuff. This thing
Right.
should be part of you. It should be instant, and it should just be an instant reaction to pick up the camera. And obviously, these are all prior to autofocus and all of that. These are all shot on Leicas, and it's about isolating and framing instantly, and as I say, you work alongside good guys and you see how they move their feet and how they move slowly until the moment arrives, the split second arrives. And then, here, like, we don't need the rest of the house, and we don't need anything other than the cracks reflecting the cracks on this lady's face. It's about what do you see? I know you see it, but do you feel it? Is something
Can you
that I think,
smell it? Can you feel it?
yeah, it's really important. And like the shot of the soldier or the Marine, you know, that feeling of um, when do I press the button? When, because he's not doing this time after time after time. It's like, when do you actually expose it? Do you wait in case if he sits up, it's a totally different frame, etc. So I think it's a lot of it is about instinct, but what am I trying? What am I praying for that I can? What scene is going to bring all of this together so that the reader knows the entire story just from this one frame, even though you might be trying for 6, 8, or 10 pages. And things, as I say, the guys who go to photography schools and things, I'm not sure they're being taught about the business side of life and about how they're going to make a living when they come out, but they just need to understand that they have to have something to say. They can't just be going, bam, 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 with hundreds of frames of on a card and expect to make a living out of this business.
No, they've got two huge disadvantages when it just comes to the technical side. One, they can fill up a card with thousands of images, and two, I mean, I think of this image here. It's like, this feels more like a 35, but what do you do when you got that 16 to 35? You've got, all of a sudden, you've got all these other choices that you have to make, and you can't just say, this is what I see. You've got your 35, you got your 28, and this is where I need to stand, and you eliminate all those other variables. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think everyone finds the way they want to shoot, and some But for me, I think that's the important thing, is to realize that, you can't be like everyone else. You've got to find your own voice. Otherwise, there's no point standing next to Reuters and AP and Getty and all those guys, because no one's going to use your photographs. And if they don't use your photographs, you're not going to pay the bills in this day and age. So you have to find something. You have to do stories like AIDS. I did 7 years. I crisscrossed sub-Saharan Africa with people saying, what are you doing that for? No one's interested. Nobody cares. There's more R&D, research and development, on finding a cure for baldness than there is for HIV.
Right.
And you have to kind of ignore all of that. I'm a kind of very gentle guy, but you have to have something inside you, a steel, that when something happens and you look at it and you think, I have to go on that. And they go, well, even your editors are saying, why are you going to New York? When the 9/11, Magnum were having a party. Have you seen James's photographs? Why are you're not going to be there for a week? You have to ignore all of that. Otherwise, you'll just stay in bed. Being a freelance, the hardest thing is getting your legs out of the bed in the morning, because everyone will tell you don't go. And you just so that you have to have something to say. Otherwise, you're just not going to create anything that's valuable at all.
You have to have something to say, and then if you're there, you got to make sure you say it. You can't waste that opportunity.
Definitely. It's, and you have to, people look at this photograph and something, people go, oh, that's terrible, whatever. I was working, her name is Mercy, baby Mercy. My story was on AIDS. This lady has delivered 10 babies in this hut, 10 babies in a week. And the relevance of this photograph is that with Médecins Sans Frontières, just by giving her a packet of razor blades, they stopped the mother-to-child transmission completely. Prior to that, she was using the same razor blade to cut the umbilical cord every time. So the children were being born. So, and when you're working on a story like this, quite rightly, you have to adhere to the charity's code of ethics. And we spent hours and hours with this lady who was told in her own language what was going to happen and why we were there and why it was important. So it isn't a question of just barging your way into someone's life and taking a photograph, as we say. You do have to conduct yourself properly.
If people understand why you're there and why it's important to share their story, their generosity is unbelievable. I thought one of the telling things about this image was actually the latex gloves, which probably she didn't have a week ago as well.
Exactly right. Some people would, the old-fashioned way of describing her would be a witch doctor. She's actually a traditional birth attendant, a TBA. But the women of the villages would come to her and she would deliver their children, but they would virtually all be HIV positive until she was given just simply gloves and razor blades by the charity.
The simplest of things.
Yeah.
And that's something that can easily translate, and you don't know who's going to see your work. And then a little old lady, sends a check for $10,000 to buy razor blades and gloves. You don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And no, that's a really vital thing that I think photographers give back whenever they can, whether to charities or to younger guys or to young reporters who overstep the mark. I think it's important to that's not to say all photographers are angels. We know that's not the case, but I think how you get through your career is important. You don't need to be hardcore type aggressive kind of guy. Quite the reverse, really. I think a degree of sensitivity is is a great sensitivity, optimism, and curiousness is a great combination in photojournalism.
Yeah, the people that are aggressive and barge in and demand certain, privilege, you can see it in their images right away, and their images don't last. I mean, there's no getting around that. One of the things you said earlier, which you were talking about being in the room with Michael Rand and Harold Evans, and it's kind of what we always hope to do as photojournalists, just get in the room some way. And then once we're there, observe and be curious and learn and make that image, obviously.
Yeah, and watch them edit. Watch these guys look at a contact sheet. I really miss contact sheets. I think in one of your interviews, I think it was Karen Malarkey was saying, about how the guys now they delete all their their bad photographs, and that's such a mistake. I mean, a good photo editor can read what you're thinking in the 36 frames on a contact sheet, and
well, it's intimidating because they can see your inner thoughts. A good photo editor will know things that the closest people, your spouse, might not know about you by looking at your contact sheets.
Sure, and they can teach you. They can say, "Look, have you noticed this?" And they can show you your contact sheets, and they go, "Have you noticed that you always seem to hit your best pictures at number 15 or 16 or 17?" Or the guys who tend to get it right within 7 frames or 8 frames, they can show you things. They can show you, look, you're not bending your knees enough. You're shooting everything from the same height. Just simple things like that. I mean, I think it's also Karen who talks about. There's a little film of Henri Cartier-Bresson where he's in the street and he's almost like a ballet dancer. At the moment he strikes, he's actually up on his toes. It's a really beautiful piece of action. He's been following someone, and then he just makes the one split second, then he's gone. These are quite important things. Even strap lengths. How do you wear your cameras? If you're wearing 2, if you're using 2 or 3 or whatever, like we used to. It's which is your go-to camera? What about the light meter? Those things that I think McCullen always said he would always do a light reading, because he didn't want to go all the way somewhere and then get the exposure wrong after putting himself in such harm's way. So there's lots of things like that.
Yeah, the technical things, the things that they're the things that can make all your effort, all your risk for naught, and they're so important. And even like Cartier-Bresson on his tiptoes, the moment he released the shutter, he was frozen. The camera was frozen. The camera wasn't moving. He wasn't moving. The littlest things like that are the things that, if someone's giving birth, if you're being shot at, whatever it is, you don't, that's not the time to miss that stuff.
No, and I think that is a very important thing. There is no point going, and it's the same for portrait photographers and people. People look at these sometimes a great portrait, and they think the photographer's had a couple of hours, and most guys they get wheeled along to a fancy hotel and they're given like 3 or 4 minutes, and now the celebrity or whoever it is, they now tend to say, "Can I have a look?" And then they'll at the back of the camera and they'll go, "Oh, you got it," and then they're gone.
Right.
So it's you don't have a lot of time to do this stuff, and I think that's really important for youngsters to understand. You really need to know your equipment, and to know what you're trying to say is important.
Well, if you don't have anything to say in words, you're certainly not going to have anything to say in pictures. You have to advocate, you have to explain, you have to be able to translate that. And that's where picture editors speak photo and they speak real words. And they're like our translators. They're the ones that can advocate for us. But as photographers, we have to be able to do that for ourselves now more than ever.
Definitely, yes. And you know, you have to now more than ever, you have to be smart. You have to understand that you ain't going to make a living as a quotes war photographer or whatever. You know, you're going to need 6 or 7 different income streams to feed your family and to do the thing. You're going to have to be able to, uh, you know, shoot video. You're going to have to be able to, you know, sell your prints, to have everything cataloged properly. You're going to have to be a good business person to chase the money. You're going to have to take jobs that you don't really want to do. You're going to have one folio for the corporate clients who, you know, who might want to pay you an awful lot of money, and another folio for a picture editor or someone who might send you somewhere. And you also need your personal work. This is not a one trick pony anymore.
Tell me, so that's interesting. Is your personal work the same as what we just looked at in this book?
Yeah, I mean, basically because I made the decision that I wouldn't, you know, chase a contract for a newspaper or time. I wanted my ideas to be the currency. My thing was I want to go without the pressures of or expectations of a photo editor, and then just do my story and then work with people who would sell the work on my behalf, and they would take their percentage quite rightly, and then that would free me up to keep working. That was my, you know, the way I wanted to work. I didn't want to be. I'd been for many years working as a newspaper guy. The phone would ring 6 o'clock at night. Can you be Downing Street tomorrow morning? You know, or can you be at Heathrow or whatever? I wanted to do it my way, and I think I became a better photographer. I certainly became a better photographer when I dumped the zooms and whatever, and I kind of cleared my mind of all the, you know, I stopped carrying a ton of stuff that I never used on my back, and kind of simplified it.
So, you know, some of our mentors would say that photography doesn't change things; it doesn't make things better. And you've devoted your life to making things better, to at least witnessing and sharing what you've seen. Do you look back and do you say I was successful in doing that?
I was successful. I've done the best that I can. You know, I don't regard myself as being, you know, I look at truly great photographers and I think I wish I'd done this and whatever. I did the best. I've always done the best I can, and I've always treated people with respect and tried to make the best photographs that I could. And you know, as you look back over your career and you think, well, I'm a happy guy. I don't. I think if there's only one person who walked into this room now, I would be ashamed. I did something that I shouldn't have done, but that's just one person in 50 years. So I think you have to be happy with that, really.
So when it comes to changing the world, and I just, you know, you kind of led me here. What I always say, you know, you might not change 100 people, you might not change 1,000 or 100,000 people, but you'll help a couple, and you will change yourself. What kind of what do you? So you seem like you realize that about yourself, that if you wouldn't maybe have been in these situations, you'd be a much different person today, right? I guess that's what I'm saying.
Well, who knows? I mean, I think you know, we're very we become kind of, we got to these situations that we become, jack of all trades, master of none type. But I think generally, I have helped people. My pictures have, I think, educated and informed and entertained and raised some money. They maybe inspired a few youngsters to look at photojournalism as a career. Let's put it this way: I don't think I've done much harm. I might not have done a great deal of good, but I don't think I've done a lot of harm. I mean, photography it's quite a selfish thing to do, because when it's done well and people say nice things about your work, it's a really nice. I guess it's like, you cover a lot of sport. I think it's like a sportsman who comes up through the ranks and does well, but then you have the dying of the light. You have the end of the career, and passing on to someone else. There's some great young photographers out there. I mean, their problem is they don't have the vehicles and they don't have the picture editors who can guide them or who have the budgets to send them places. I mean, I wonder what Life magazine how they would have covered this pandemic. It would have been amazing, I think. So, yeah, I think I just count myself as being very, very lucky.
Well, thank you, Tom, for sharing this. So hopefully your new book will come out this fall.
It will, but like everything, it's probably going to be knocked back because it's going to be printed probably in Italy or somewhere, and obviously no one's traveling. It was going to be launched in Perpignan, but it's all up in the air, isn't it, Ken? Who knows where we'll be in 6 months' time?
Sure. Well, stay safe, my friend, and make pictures when you can. We need to keep making pictures through this. I know that Life magazine doesn't exist, but these pictures will be important. You know that.
Yeah. And what about you? Are you shooting? You still looking at things to shoot? Are you staying home with the kids, or what's happening?
Well, I'm going out every day. I'm working to get in. I was in Madrid about 17 days ago, so I've been self-quarantined until, still basically I'm self-quarantined, but hanging out with the family. And so I'm trying to get into one of the hospitals here locally, and just get access, get in the room is what I'm trying to work to do now. I don't know if they'll let me in. I hope they do. I'm working it. That's my goal for this week. Get in the room.
Yeah. It looks like, it's going to be messy in New York, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, New York could get rough. I mean, it's already rough, but the next, and you've probably done the same thing, just calling people in your Rolodex and checking in on them,
Yeah.
And we have a whole generation of photo editors that were always there helping me, and now they're older and they're living in New York City, and so I'm just.
Yeah. That's a good idea. Okay, well, listen.
Okay.
Send me a little email now and again. I'll do the same for you. It's good to speak with you, and you look after yourself.
You too, Tom. Thank you.
All the best now. Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers now.